Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the first webinar linked to the Creative Business Cup Malta. So this is officially our first event. I am Toni Attard and currently serving also as the national partner on behalf of Culture Venture for Malta's participation in the Creative Business Cup. So today's webinar will be split in three sessions. The first part, we will have a conversation with Rasmus, who is the Managing Director at Creative Business Network, and we'll be talking about the Creative Business Cup on the global level and what impact will this have on a local level. We will then move on to a panel discussion to discuss the current pandemic and how Maltese artists are not just artists, but also other creative practitioners and businesses dealing with the pandemic and developing their business. And the third part, which of course will not be shared and streamed live, will be a set of breakout sessions with people in business or people who are thinking about business, where we will be sharing and discussing current challenges, networking between us. Ideally, this would have happened over a beer or a glass of wine. However, in the current circumstances, we can't do that, but we hope we will be able to do that very, very soon. So thank you all for joining us, those who are joining us live also on Facebook, and all those who registered for today's session. So let's kick off with our first conversation, and I'd like to invite now Rasmus. Hi, Rasmus.
Hi there.
Greetings from Malta to Denmark.
From Copenhagen.
How are you? I heard it was snowing this morning.
We had a hailstorm, and they were actually quite big, and it hurt when they hit you in the face. So but we're okay.
As you expect from a Mediterranean country, it's so far nice and sunny. Well,
I have a colleague from Bangladesh who is experiencing snow for the first time in her life. So she feels that she got a good treat.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
But let me start out by saying, Tony, thank you for taking on the depeche, so to speak, for Creative Business Cup in Malta. We have partners now in around 80 countries that all think that it's important to empower the entrepreneurs in the culture and creative industries, because they can come up with a lot of solutions, not only in their own fields like gaming, fashion, music, and movies, but also in a lot of other areas, such as in mobility, public health. The WHO just established a report on 3,000 cases on how artists and creatives can contribute to health. And of course, 2021 is the year of creative economy for sustainable development declared by the UN. So you are the man in Malta that will be helping us to spread the good message of the cultural and creative industries are important for growth and health and all these market values, but also there are lots of non-market values that we sometimes forget: inclusion, cohesion, understanding, identity, etc. But yeah, thanks for inviting me.
And it's a huge pleasure for me to be leading this process, especially in this particular time. You know, our plan was to launch this last year, and then the measures kicked in, and of course the global competition itself was cancelled. So let's take us a little bit through this journey and the history of the Creative Business Cup. How did it all start, and where are we today?
Sure, a quick one. It started out actually in 2010 when we started something that was similar to a Creative Business Cup. We didn't have a name for it yet, but it was a business development program or an entrepreneurship skills program for creatives. It was after we'd done a study on how that the people in the creative industries are just as ambitious for commercial success as other sectors. Often there's this, the creatives, they're doing it just for the fun of it. I'm sure if there's some designers among you that you've been asked, can you do my business card? Oh, you need to get paid for it. Or can you do my visual identity? Do you really need? I thought you did it for fun. But so we did that, and in 2012 we were asked to whether this could be a global initiative by something called the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And we went to Liverpool and pitched the idea of a creative industries open, just like we have a clean tech open and a med tech open and all these other tech opens. And 17 countries joined us back then in 2012. In 2013, we were up to 36 with Saudi Arabia joining in, training women entrepreneurs every year since. So it's been now expanding. And what we used to be a competition for entrepreneurs that was in need of a network, we're now a network that is running a competition such as CBC Malta. We also, to say with all modesty, a bit of a media company, since we are publishing all the stories of both failures and successes of creative startups. We also are doing EU projects together and other initiatives. We have a great focus on Africa and how the cultural and creative industries can help with economic development there. So now we're doing a lot of other stuff that just
right. It's not just a competition. There's much more than it being. It's a network. So what from your own perspective, what makes a great creative startup for the Creative Business Cup?
For the Creative Business Cup, it's one that will be successful. Both that it's one that uses its creative skills. So skills from those sectors that we define as creative, which is, I mentioned some before: music, movies, fashion, etc. And then also being a commercial success, because it is a business cup. What will have the potential of becoming a great company? And the reason why we're putting a focus on this is because there is a market failure. Some of the non-creatives get more easily funded. We know that creative companies, creative startups have a harder time getting access to finance, finding investors. They're more international. In other words, if you're a creative person from Malta, you will usually be born global, not just because you're from Malta, but even from Estonia, from Denmark, from the US, the market will be global. We all have to admit we've danced the Gangnam Style, not knowing what the hell they were singing about. But this is the fashion, the music, etc. It crosses borders. So there are certain market failures related to the creative industries, and that's why it's worthwhile doing something for them, such as a cup that can actually highlight some of the good ones.
So of course, you mentioned a couple of sectors. So we're looking quite a variety here, diversity of sectors, from advertising, architecture, design, 3D printing. But also we're looking at how these industries now also cross-sect with other industries, be it health, be it the environment, and this kind of cross-fertilization that is happening right now. If we look at the previous winners, would you be able to give us a couple of examples of some highlights of what these companies look like? What did they produce? What did they create? And what was their business model like?
So, for example, for the first time in 2019, Denmark won the global finals. And it's usually been a joke among creative startups in Denmark that the CBC was the only competition that Danish startups could never win. We have the Jante law here in the Nordics, where you're supposed not to think that you're better than others. But actually, Denmark won, and it was a French and Danish architect that had created a urinal for women. And you would think that actually that's something someone else would have thought of that, because there are lots of women in the world and they have to pee. Also when they run marathons and when they're at rock concerts, etc. But no one had, and it's actually, you would say, yeah, what is that? But it's actually both. They have a patent, so there's a technical issue. They have also a industrial design protection, so there's a design element into it. And there's also, of course, a brand. You can look it up. It's called lapee.dk, LAPEE.dk. That was the winner of the global finals, and the market is huge because women are peeing everywhere. So you could say that is definitely one where some architects, some designers took their competences and brought it into the benefit of the world. We have had in 2017 China winning with how to teach robotics to kids. So this was about, you could say it's an ed tech company in a way, but they uses their creative skills to teach how to put together a robot and how to make it work, how to program and all that. We're usually a bit skeptical of tech in CBC. We like the crafts part of it, and we have seen a lot of startups that are also in, for example, in jewelry and hearing aid, or in this cross sector between something that is an old craft like design, sewing, what it could be, and some very modern new technologies. So we're not in the sense scared of technologies, but they should be an enabler to the creative process.
What does the global competition give to the participants?
Well, usually I'm always asked, so what is the money prize? and it's quite modest. And I haven't fixed it yet for this year. But what we do help you with, we help not only the participants or the winning, for example, we eventually will have Creative Business Cup Malta, the winner. And that winner will actually participate in a 1 month learning program with all the other national winners. In other words, get contacts in 80 other countries. It will also be have access to organizations like your own, Toni. For example, if there's a Chinese startup that wants to set up business in the EU, they could contact you, and you will help them make sure that they find a good place to start in Malta. Sorry if it's a bit noisy now because it's hailing again, and I can't control the hail against the sound of it.
Yeah,
So I isolate myself somewhere in my basement. Anyway, so those are some of the startups we had in 2013. A teddy bear called Teddy the Guardian, a teddy bear with medical sensors inside. So these were fashion designers or toy designers that had made this teddy bear that could measure the health of a child if it was sick, monitor the heart rate, oxygen level, etc., from a distance. So these kind of
and so the success rate of these organizations now, these companies post their participation, have they grown? Has it left an impact on their own business?
Yes, I can send you some quotes, of course, and also we haven't been good enough at monitoring them. And in general, it's difficult to monitor startups and how they go. And many of them will, or some of them will fail because being a creative startup, you are in a market that is much less predictable than, let's say, milk production and consumption. You know how to make milk, how much you get if you have excellent amounts of cows, and you know pretty much how many people will drink. If you're in fashion, music, movies, etc., you don't really know what the demand will be. So you will see some companies fail. We have a pretty good track record, though, of startups. They keep growing. We don't have any unicorns yet, but hopefully that will come soon, and maybe it will be a Maltese company.
Well,
yeah. So when you ask me about what do we give a global network. We give training programs. We give access to finance. We help with IPR issues. We do a lot of different stuff because startups in the creative industries need a lot of different stuff. So it really is that we help them with, and it's quite individually tailored to the startups that participate. And by the way, the top 10 from Malta will all be invited to join the global finals end of June in Copenhagen. That will be digital. So join.
That was my next question. Tell us about this this year's edition.
Yes, as you know, Jesus, these are golf balls falling down from the sky. Sorry. Last year we had to cancel the global finals, and some countries actually did run a competition, just as we did in Denmark. So we have about 20 finalists from 20. Sorry, I have to close.
That's fine.
I hope my house will stand. So we have some startups from last year that will all participate. So we decided that instead of canceling again a global finals, we will do it digitally, and we encourage all the national partners to do a digital or a hybrid version of their national competition. So, for example, I know CBC for the Czech Republic, they already decided to do a physical event, an in-person event. They will now also turn it into a digital event. By doing that, we do it, first of all, making it all digital makes it much more, the audience much wider. There usually 5 to 10 times as many people will attend a digital event as a physical event. And you can also invite you, Toni, can invite jury members from Hawaii or Malta or Denmark into the jury that will be good for the startups, that they will then listen to the startups pitch. And so on one hand, it makes it the more dissemination of the great startups that you have, but also it becomes more fair and democratic. So it's not just the countries that have had an early rollout of all the vaccinations that will be able to come to Copenhagen. It will actually be all the countries that can participate in the global finals, no matter where they are, and no matter the level of support that they can get from sponsors, etc. So it becomes more democratic in the Nordic sense of it.
Indeed, indeed. And we hope that we will be able to have a more of a hybrid, perhaps, version than for next year's competition.
Oh yeah. So also this fall we will try to make it up with other. We know it's important to talk about business over a beer or over a cup of coffee, as you mentioned before. It's important to meet. But now this is the next best, and it's not that bad actually. It's quite good.
Excellent. Rasmus, perfectly on time. So I'd like to wrap up our brief conversation with the timeline for the National Cup. So a reminder for those following us on Facebook and the participants for today's webinar. So the deadline is the 28th of April. And so that's on a couple of weeks. And the national finals will be held on the 14th of May. That, of course, depends on the way we're gonna organize these finals. Depend on also the measures which will be announced in the coming weeks. But so far these are going to be also held online, and of course then the global finals that will be held in June. So we've already started receiving a number of applications, very interesting and diverse applications. So thank you all and good luck for your submissions, and we look forward to seeing your applications and presenting them to our international jury. And thank you once again, Rasmus, for your help and support. So, and you'll also be with us for a couple of more minutes as we start our conversation now, talking about the situation in Malta and how creative businesses are dealing with the pandemic. So to lead this conversation, I would like to invite now Audrey Farrugia from Malta Enterprise. Audrey, I'm just checking if you're there. You're there.
Hey.
I can see you, and we can all see you. So good afternoon, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to moderate and also to support the Creative Business Cup Malta in its initial phase, not only through the support of Malta Enterprise, but also your partnership in making sure we provide the best service for our creative startups.
It is a pleasure, Toni. Thank you so much. Thank you, and Rasmus as well, for the insightful Q&A session with the fantastic cases, the previous cases that were very, very interesting to hear. Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Malta Enterprise and Culture Venture, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for today's session. Now, as Rasmus mentioned as well, today's session is also oriented towards startups. And in this regard, I'd like to say a few words about a recent initiative that Malta Enterprise has launched. Now, as a leader in startup support, the corporation has recently launched the Start in Malta platform. You can see the colors behind. So that is a portal, the Start in Malta platform, whereby it is solely dedicated to startups. It provides information about startup grants, namely the Business Start 21 and also Startup Finance, mainly these initiatives for startups. However, it also supports in other areas, whereby we have also, we are currently showcasing a selection of key partners who are also active in the startup environment. Therefore, this platform is envisaging to be the first place where startups can look for information, either when it comes to starting up, set up their startup, or else later on when they are scaling up their business. Therefore, I do encourage you to visit the startinmalta.com website and browse through the information that is made readily available for you there. Now, besides that, I'd like to move on to the item on our agenda, which is surely a session that you are all looking forward to. The panel Creative Industry Health Check, are Malta's creative businesses weathering the storm? Here we will be exploring a selection of Malta creative industry sectors, and together with our panelists, we will be discussing whether Maltese creatives have got what it takes to deal with these unprecedented times. In the meantime, do feel free to reach out to us during the session through the Q&A feature on Zoom. We will be replying to your questions online, and time permitting, we may also forward some of the questions to our panelists. Thus, I would like to welcome today's panel, Ms. Marianne Cauchi, Director Funding Strategy at Arts Council Malta, Ms. Zoe Gatt, co-founder of startup company Flint, Howard T. Debono, founder of Jagged House Entertainment, as well as Peter Grech, founder of Brandonwagon. Hello and good afternoon to you.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Such a pleasure to have you here as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. So the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has not only affected our social life, but also had an impact on the way we do business. Now, following this brief statement, I would like to jump immediately to the questions that we have today. And I'd like to learn how COVID-19 affected your business and whether you have encountered any opportunities during this time.
Hi, Audrey, thank you. I can kickstart this if everyone's okay. From my experience, I'd like to basically divide this in three things. It's the internationalization, the content creators, and the performers. The reason I say this is because COVID-19 affected the three pillars I mentioned differently. So the internationalization of the way certain companies manage to reach out to other countries and have business ongoing through this pandemic didn't seem to be much of a problem. And from my experience, I actually had potentially even better experiences during COVID with international companies. So this, and I'm talking about here with record companies, licensing, potentially because they were working from home, they had more time to communicate, and quite frankly, it wasn't a case where you had to travel and you have to get business done in that way, but you had to find other ways, and as an island, it actually helped. So in that respect, I actually saw some benefits. The content creators, we're talking about music production, studio, artists in general, I think I would say that nothing majorly impacted their workflow, as in they wanted to create. It's something which they normally do, and they did that. Some of them encountered problems because they were not self-sufficient, so they had funding problems in that respect. So the content creators, I would say, as a general rule, somehow kept on going. It's where the problem lies with the performance, and the performance is related to events. So in my case, for example, in Jagged House, one of the businesses we do is we have artists, we manage artists, and we've had 134 cancellations in a year, which is a lot, and probably one of the most. So that impacted our business model greatly, and we had to find ways how to find, income for the artists, which is where the major problem was and still is to today. So that's from my assessment. I can allow someone else to.
Thank you, Howard. Peter?
Yeah, sure. So for those who don't know, I run a company called Brandonwagon. We're a creative consultancy. We help clients with brand consultancy, strategy consultancy. We do some quite significant tech work. So that's kind of our line of business. We were hit quite significantly at the very, very beginning. I think in the first month, we probably lost about 70% of our work, which is obviously quite a massive shock to the system. And obviously, you know, the big word unprecedented, I think, is the key word over here. Having said that, I think panned out over, you know, the rest of the 2020 year, you know, revenue went down by 40%. We did have to let go of some people, which was probably the most horrible and painful thing to do for us, which was obviously a very significant blow. You know, we did that with our hands on heart. We helped a lot of them, you know, find new work. So, you know, we really supported the team. I'm happy to say we even employed one of the ex-team members back. So that's, you know, great, you know, opportunity for us. But it also was a double-edged sword that it gave us a lot of opportunities to really accelerate a number of things that we wanted to do before. It kind of gave us a license to say, okay, you know, how can we look at our business in a completely new way? You know, what can we do differently? And I think taking that sort of opportunity, you know, we saw different ways of working. We saw different and better ways to work with our staff, better ways to work with our clients. And it did open up a number of doors. In terms of opportunities, just like Howard was saying, we did actually land many more global clients in a much cheaper way than we did before. So before, to get our global clients, we had to step onto a plane, you know, book flights, book hotels, you know, big travel expenses. You know, today we just do it over a Zoom call. So effectively, you know, getting a local client or a global client makes absolutely no difference. We had more global clients last year than we ever did before. That opened up a lot of big opportunities. It opened up big opportunities for our staff. We had a number of our staff members who actually, you know, moved country over the year, and it hasn't made any difference to them. It also made us look and revisit at, you know, the way we look at our own space, or the way we, you know, we revisit sort of, you know, do we need an office? Do we need a studio? And if we do, how do we use that space? And that's, I think, subject probably for another question. But, you know, it really gave us a lot of, you know, a good double-edged, you know, sword. Big opportunities, you know, some big painful things, but, you know, as creatives, we look at things differently, and, you know, we're inspired by opportunities, not by problems.
Thank you. And it's always also, it was a matter of reassessing what you have now, and how you obviously would find the opportunity to work better with what you have during obviously these times. Definitely. Thank you, Peter. Zoe, as a startup, starting in at the beginning of the pandemic, just slightly a few weeks before, how did this all affect your startup? And you could also give a brief introduction of what you do as well.
Okay, so thank you, Audrey, first of all, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Toni, as well. It's a privilege to be among such creative entrepreneurs and minds. So a brief overview of what we do. I'm Zoe, the co-founder of Flint, and we've created an app, an augmented reality platform that brings prints to life in the exact same way that you can see prints come alive in the Harry Potter movies. So we bring magical experiences to printed media, namely photography, books, ads, posters, you name it, we can do anything with it. We make them move, photographs can talk, etc., etc. So, I mean, being a startup founder is challenging in itself. Obviously, you're faced with 1,001 obstacles, and you're constantly, you're constantly reminded of all the obstacles that are coming in your way on a daily basis. You're aware of the statistics and the odds that are not in your favor. And on top of that, we have the pandemic to deal through. Sorry about that. That would be my dishwasher. This is one of the things that we now have.
Talk about obstacles, Zoe. Talk about obstacles.
Exactly. Wavering through it. It's okay. So, I mean, wavering through the pandemic obviously has been challenging to all businesses all around the globe. Above and beyond that, we also have the challenges that a startup faced. Like Peter was saying, we are in the same way, we are a creative agency, so to speak. So in the same way, any projects that we had lined up got dropped just like that, obviously, from events that we were incorporating with tourism, from art exhibitions that we had in the pipeline, and other such launches, whether it was because it was an experience in public or because people no longer had the budget for it, it was essentially dropped. But that gave us quite a rapid opportunity to make quite a lot of changes, rethink our project, rethink our product itself, and the obstacles within themselves, as you were saying, Audrey and Peter, provided us with ample more opportunities to reinvent ourselves. And we actually were inspired by our limitations. So that is essentially how we coped through it. We created projects that would be reachable to other people via posts or online or printing things or being out in the open.
Thank you, Zoe. I always see it as a point of I am here now and what can I do in this position. So basically all of you have reflected during that time, during the pandemic, in a better way, or finding the opportunity to make yourself better. A survey conducted, this takes me to this question, in which a survey conducted last year by Culture Venture, focusing on artists, reported that generating income, future work, and receiving payments were three major concerns for the creatives. Now, to this effect, we have noted that some creative, and it also came up in the earlier discussion, have moved away from the creative sector to ensure a sustainable income. Therefore, do you feel that a year later this is still relevant? Was it something that was experienced just at the beginning of the pandemic? Maybe people just shifted towards a more comfortable area or a sustainable area. But how do you think that this is still happening now, a year later?
I believe it's worse, actually. I believe it's worse. We've lost people in our sector, especially performers, and technical people and experienced people who have been nurtured through this industry throughout the years, and unfortunately could not sustain their livelihood and had to shift to other sectors. So as the survey rightfully, basically pointed out in the data received, it's very reflective of what I'm aware of on a personal level. So that is true, and with that I have to add why. You see, there were ways where we dealt with COVID, and let's take streaming as an example. The problem with streaming is that the monetization of that digital world is still a problem. Was and still is a problem. So it's not just a case that there wasn't an effort to try and salvage what you could when all the events were cancelled and what you can do to do that. And it's true, as Rasmus say, you do reach out to more audiences than you would do potentially in a live audience situation. But to monetize it, it's still a problem. Mm-hmm. So that is the added thing which pretty much reflected the reality where we're at the moment. There's also concern into what's to come. So the uncertainty is probably the biggest problem here. And when you're faced with uncertainty, you cannot prepare, you cannot plan, you cannot even counteract a problem, because even if you have an idea how you can counteract it, you don't know what's going to happen 6 months down the line. And why a roadmap is so important, because it gives room for our industry, which, as we all know, isn't similar to a bar or a restaurant where they have stock of 3 weeks that they can prepare in advance. Sometimes they need 3 months, 6 months, even a year in advance to prepare something. So the content creation for something requires that certainty where we're going to go and how it can operate. The hybrid models help out as what I call the plan B option, because you can preempt a project, and with that in mind, go for a hybrid model, because that gives you room to maneuver. but it still does not give enough room for funding, and hence why people moved to other industries.
Thank you, Howard. Any other comments?
Yes, I would like to say my bit. Obviously, I agree totally with what Howard is saying as well, and several comments that have been already said up to now. Not to make it sound any better, and not that I have any solutions, but this is a first experience, at least for most of the people in the sector. Unless it was, you know, First, Second World War or sort of thing. I don't recall living, at least I'm not that old, but I don't recall living any similar experience. So it's quite new. Everything is very new. Every month was new. Every period, whether it was summer, whether then we reverted back, and like at the moment we're back again to, we're feeling like we're like last year, but in reality we're more informed maybe. I think this is key at this point, to learn from this experience and say, look, how can this not happen again? I mean, how can we, the culture and creative sectors, prepare themselves for any other eventuality, because we don't have any guarantee this might not happen again in some different form, shape, or whatever. So looking at my end, as Arts Council as well, we're looking into the new strategy now. Not that it wasn't mentioned before, but maybe now it's higher time that it happens, to formalize and regularize and give more status to the artist. I think that would maybe safeguard, not that they aren't being safeguarded with the little means that are being offered. But when you look at other countries, for example, you know, maybe countries like Italy, they didn't get any zitch, nothing, they're not helped out. Then you have other countries, yes, maybe they were given much more than Maltese resident artists are being given. But I think we need to learn. I don't have the replies, and that's why sometimes I'm stammering, because I would love to have more replies of how this can be solved, and how one can prepare himself, herself, the entity, organization, for upcoming situations, similar situations. Because if I look back, way back in March last year, I recall we spent a good 2-3 months. We were totally, as a sector, and I include myself, jammed. We couldn't function. We couldn't even think any other way. Obviously, as Arts Council, we tried to ignite discussions through, you know, ACM labs, special labs, Arts Reboot, which was in collaboration with Culture Venture as well. Lots of discussions took place, and also later on the COVID-19 task force, which did generate and did create, you know, happenings which helped out the situation, or, you know, even just talking about it and sharing experiences. Sometimes this is helpful. But lot more needs to happen concretely. This is something I know I agree with most of the colleagues on the panel, that we look after something very concrete, you know, not just headed there. And so how are we going to prepare ourselves for this not to happen again? You know, that is my biggest question, I have to say. That's
I mean, if I can add,
If I may just counter.
Yeah, sure, go ahead, Howard.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
No, I was just going to give my 2 cents to the conversation over here. And okay, when we look at the creative industry, I mean, it's a really wide, broadening industry. To use the term creative is a massive term in its own right. I've seen many amount of tech people who are extremely creative, financial people who are extremely creative, sometimes too creative and maybe in the wrong way. We're seeing a lot of that at the moment. But I think what we need to look at, and when we talk about, you know, the performing arts, I think there's a huge issue that we need to deal with, and I think we need to face. Clearly, the industry is not pandemic resilient, and obviously, I mean, it could have easily been seen from beforehand that it was not pandemic resilient, but obviously nobody presumed that there was ever going to be a pandemic. We're looking at an industry which is obviously as old as the hills, and it is as treasured as those hills. It is as treasured because, you know, life, irrespective of what industry we're in, whether that's in, you know, business, tech, finance, you know, whatever it is, the importance of performing arts is huge. So the responsibility for fixing the problem is not one that the creative arts or the performing arts, you know, should be looking at in isolation. I think, you know, the importance over here is that, you know, many more industries, many more facets come to the table to actually support the artists, you know, in a much broader sense. I don't think that the problem of how do we fix, you know, the issue of generating income, will there be any future work, how do we receive payments within the industry is something that the industry should be left alone to deal with. Quite frankly, I think it is up to the rest of the industries to come in and sort of, you know, help with the bailout. And I think that's a really, you know, really key and important thing. We cannot look at the arts on their own. And I think that it is up to us creative businesses in general, but also, you know, in general, all industries should come forward and help out. You know, like we're looking at, you know, sustainability as a massive goal because the world, you know, needs a lot of more people looking at the problem and dealing with, you know, our environmental issues. I think our culture issues are hugely as important. You know, the world without nature and the world without culture would equally be a disappointing place to live in. Sorry, Howard, I don't know if you want to...
No, it's very, very, very well said. You're absolutely correct. And I was going to actually delve into that. But also from the positive side, there were some successful models within the creative world, such as Netflix, just to mention one particular point, where digitalization or the monetization of that worked on the so-called subscription model, right? So you see, that used to happen before the pandemic anyhow. So there were elements within the creative sector which were utilizing that already. It's only because certain structures were not in place, at least from a Malta perspective, were not in place enough for us to exploit those situations, and therefore we were dealt with a far different problem than other countries have, even though they might not have helped as much as Malta has helped, whilst other countries have helped quite a lot, because they had structures in place. That makes a hell of a difference, and that is where co-industry help, as Peter is recommending, can kick in, because you can actually create a commercial model that suits other industries as well, just to make a point of that.
Thank you all. Yes, I think a structure is well needed. I agree as well. So, Marianne, you've mentioned some assistance being helped out by the Arts Council and its role during this time. Could you mention maybe some of these measures, and something else that I'd like to also wrap up with your conversation, and maybe the others can also fit in. Do you think that financial aid is enough for local creatives to be resilient? Do you think that just by issuing grants we can make the creatives more sustainable? Or are they also are there other adaptabilities and realities that the creatives are maybe being faced as well? So, Marianne, in your hands.
It's very tempting to actually start from your last question, but let me go through the first question, where you're actually asking for me to share as Arts Council what sort of ground we have covered. Yes, immediately we had taken up in issuing a special call which involved financing. In parallel with that, there were several discussions, and there was training and development and knowledge sharing, networking. It didn't stop at any point in time. It happened mostly virtually. In the meantime, yes, we were very aware there were private surveys going on, but also through the COVID-19 task force, we realized that an audience survey was in place to happen. And this is still happening while we talk. In fact, initial results have already been actually announced. There was some infographic on that as well, whereby we explained what the audience is, because at the end of the day, if we're talking of performances, we have to talk of audiences as well. What the audience is, the audience perception throughout this period is about, and how is it's developing. So this is a tracer which is happening while we talk, and it's always being updated on the Arts Council website accordingly. Obviously, financial help is not enough, I have to say. In fact, apart from the 3.62 million in schemes, which was this concoction, this amount was made up of new funds and also existing funds which were redesigned, retweaked to actually address the needs and remain relevant to today's needs. No, it is not enough. It's far from enough. It's not exhaustive. It's enough. It's sickening even to see that you have, for example, submissions that amount to 200% of what you really can actually offer, which is sad in a way and enticing in another, in the sense. Why? Because you realize that the sector is responding, is reacting to the situation. It's not jammed as it was a year ago, but at the same time, you'd like to help, and there isn't the necessary finance to do it. Obviously, when we talk of finance, we cannot just look at funds being disbursed by Arts Council Malta. We need to look also at the wage supplement element, etc. So definitely, funding is not enough. Big uppercase answer. No, it's not enough. While support and knowledge sharing and training and mentoring is very, very, very important, especially when it comes to business acumen. There is a vacuum within the sector where there isn't enough business acumen, which obviously, thanks even to collaborations with Malta Enterprise, this is actually going to start happening very, very shortly. Where we improve the business acumen within the culture and creative sector. On the other hand, thanks also to the strategy, we're seeing that, and to the national culture policy, it's something we can't forget to mention, the national culture policy, which at the moment is going through consultation up to the 16th or the 19th April, one of these dates. Basically, the national culture policy emphasizes very much good governance and the status of the artist. The status of the artist is far from being in the right place. So it needs to improve. Why? If we improve the status on the artist, certain issues like we had to face, and I think members on the panel know what I'm talking about, and especially Howard and Toni, etc. Certain issues we had to face when it comes, for example, to wage supplement. If the culture and creative sectors were in order, we wouldn't have needed to go through what we've been through to earn the wage supplement like all other professionals. So if preparing ourselves ahead, for example, the income averaging, it's not happening yet. 7% taxation, it's not happening yet. So these things, when I'm saying it's not happening yet, I don't want to be negative at all. What I'm saying is there is lots that can be done, and still we're looking forward it happening, and I'm full faith that it will happen. It will happen, and I hope it will happen very soon, because we can't afford never-ending stories. Something that's very interesting. One last thing. It was mentioned earlier during the conversation between Toni and Rasmus. The cross-fertilization. I think, as I interpret this, the cross-sectoral element, it's important that when it comes to art, artists, etc., we do not remain siloed. I think we need to delve much more into the different sectors, as in when it comes to health, when it comes to education, when it comes to economy in general, when it comes to tourism. I mean, we need to be more present and cross-fertilize and, you know, gain from finance, banking. It means gain from these you know, promising sectors.
Thank you, Marianne.
My other.
Yes, I think if I may intervene, carrying on with what Marianne had to say on this cross-fertilization model, I think there's a lot of work that can be potentially done, because funding is indeed just a band-aid, essentially, taking it from the creative business perspective as well as that of a new business. At times, especially given the pandemic, this has been probably the most unpredictable economic era that anyone has experienced in the past 100 years, probably more. So I think that with cross-fertilization and working together to build an ecosystem cross-sectorally could see us through even in the long term. Why? Because whilst the financial sector might be struggling with creative thinking on how to fix particular solutions, the creative industry or the art or any random artists, performing artists, freelancers might benefit from mentorship, financial assistance, financial forecasting, and any other such help. At the end of the day, we are in this together, but funding is definitely not enough to see us through this pandemic. It is just a means to an end temporarily, taken from my 100 phone calls with Malta Enterprise, asking for incentives, as well as Audrey 100% knows. There is also, so to speak, not enough awareness of incentives and grants for startups out there. Not really coincidentally, I surround myself with like-minded youths that are business owners, freelancers, etc., etc. And 95% of us do not know what is out there. So amongst us, we are communicating these incentives. Apply for this grant, go there. There's this available with MITA, there's that available without Arts Council Malta. So talking about it more really helps. But going back to the creative industry and performing arts industry, at least looking at the glass half full, we can safely say that at least value is slowly being accrued towards the creative industry, as if the pandemic has taught us nothing, at least it's to appreciate how valuable the creative industries are all across the world, because without the creative industry, without the performing arts industry, streaming live shows, or Netflix, or reading your favorite books, we wouldn't have made it through lockdown or quarantine or any other such phase of solitude in our homes. So at least through local shows or online streams, we can safely say that it's come this far, and a bit of awareness is being raised for sure.
Thank you so much, Zoe. So it will definitely be a pleasure for you to know that Start in Malta is actually will be helping you to get the information, you and your peers get the information, not from just only Malta Enterprise grants, but also from the stakeholders, which Arts Council is one of our stakeholders on the platform. We are running out of time. However, I'd like to take Peter's and Howard's as well. Take on this question. I believe you also have some few words.
Sorry. So you mentioned funding. I see these two problems: sustainability. It's not enough to say what the government should do more, etc., but rather how can it be sustainable in the years to come. I think that is crucial. I'll take myself as an example. In my company, we never looked at public funding. It was always private sponsorships, deals with other private entities, gate money. Those days are not as they were before, and therefore we have to now look at public funding. But this is where bold decisions need to be taken by the entities and government entities, how public funding is given. And to be, I say bold because sometimes they're a bit hard. You have to take decisions, hard decisions, to counteract these problems, because this situation requires these hard decisions to ensure you have a domino effect which lasts in the years to come. Otherwise, we're going to have, honestly, the predictions I have from international top industry people aren't great. And they all say the same thing. So rather than being more negative about it, I'd rather say and look at the solutions which we should look into. And we should look at situations where funding is given to people who obviously this is their main job. Let's state the obvious first and foremost, because it is a fact, and I think it was mentioned in the beginning, that the creative arts in general is made up of two sectors. There's those who do it maybe as passionately as a hobby, etc., and those who have found ways how to have this professionally. Now, we would like to encourage the first to also become professional. Of course, that is the intention. But right now, during this pandemic, we have to look at a means to have a domino effect, which can also eventually give opportunities to other people who see it as a hobby and potentially in the future see it as a profession. So that is one thing. The other thing is the biggest problem I see is human habits with no repetition for me encourages changes in lifestyle. And this is a fact. So when you have people who, whether they go to theater or they used to go to events, once that habit is stopped, it's going to be very hard for people to get into that old lifestyle. And that is why we need to act. That is why we can't just sit dormant and just wait for things to happen. That is why we need to encourage that habit from now, because it is going to be very hard to get it back. And why the Netflix model worked, because they have content. It's all about content. So the first thing you need to do is encourage content and fund content. Then the other part follows. Then you can look at digitization, you can look at monetization and the partnerships with that.
If I can add a couple of words to what Howard said. I think number one, I think we should look at this with a bit of optimism, because obviously I'm hoping that we're closer to the end of the worst part, and hopefully we're moving towards some sort of recovery. I think whilst I totally agree, and behavioral economics shows that once you kill a habit and you do not repeat, then trends go out of the window. Having said that, there's a lot of pent up, excitement and energy of people just dying to get out there and go and watch the big rock concert and go and go to a club and let their hair down and go back to some good old ways, because obviously what we're dealing with over here is the sharing of stories through music, through arts, through theater, which is something which is quite innate in who we are. So I don't think that sort of that trend is going to go away anytime soon. I think what we need to be looking at, and I think what COVID has taught us, is that at least we should start to appreciate life and measure success in different ways. And putting the money aside, and the money is extremely important, but I think we've spoken enough about that. I think there's an element of how do we measure success, how do we measure value, and I think this is one of the biggest issues over here. That measuring a country's success is all about GDP. And when we talk about GDP, anything that is basically created and it has a monetary value is valued, but we don't measure things like happiness, we don't measure things like well-being, we don't measure things like mental health, we don't measure things like access to nature, environment, and so on and so forth. How do we measure the ROI on creative? How do we measure the ROI on culture? And I think we need to start looking for a better yardstick of measuring the value that the creative industry brings to the table. And I think this is how we need to flip the switch. And I think we should be using COVID as a perfect excuse to start the conversation, to get the conversation going. The answer is obviously not a quick fix. There is no quick fix. So I think the problem we're dealing with, the answer lies a lot in sort of education and bringing culture way back, into the early days. I see too many, I've got 3 kids, and I see too much of their time spent on stuff which doesn't make them better decision makers, on stuff that doesn't make them more creative people, on stuff that doesn't teach them how to have more empathy. And music and theatre is all about that. And I believe that is obviously, critical and very, very important. So adding more importance and giving that more importance, I think automatically will start, to bring people to look at the value that creative brings to the table. And I think, as you said, Howard, I think, build it and they will come. So yes, bring the funding to create, bring the incentives to create better content. And I think that the key word here is better and on quality. And I think, that is one of the big things over here. I think we should continue to support people who are doing this on the side. I mean, I started my business 15 years ago by singing in bars and singing at weddings, and that was my seed funding, because probably, like Rasmus was talking about, I didn't find many investors who are willing to, to invest in Pete starting this agency 15 years ago. So that's kind of how I raised my seed funding in the good old days, so. But the value of artists and the value of bringing a multidisciplinary approach, which most artists have, to the table is of huge value. So do we need to start looking at chief culture officers in organizations, chief creative officers from a creative perspective in organizations? I think that's going to make a hell of a difference as we move forward in the industry.
Thank you, Peter, for your insights as well. Stealing a bit of more time. However, I would like to ask just one more question for you. So as creative, if you had to give one recommendation to an artist or a creative individual who is following us today, what would that be? Just one recommendation during this time.
Because nobody else spoke. I think, keep putting the passion into it, keep putting your hard work into it, keep putting your heart into it, but also open your eyes and reach out to collaborate with others.
Sorry, Howard, sorry.
Go ahead, Maria.
My thing would be open to change, be open to evolve.
You've said it all. Evolving is one thing, collaboration is another. Restructuring, if need be, digitalization, even looking at archives and other things. And also be open-minded to other technology. The AI is very important. Blockchain is very important. It might be, I do have this conversation with people, and for them it's something in the air. But there's so much things happening online that if you use AI to give you the data, which you would otherwise would not have had before, because that data would have been spread with live audiences. Now you can really track certain trends, and it gives you quite a good insight, actually.
You, Zoe, would you like to add something?
Of course. I think that when you stop learning, you stop growing. That is essentially it. There are thousands of platforms from which you can learn and grow, such as Skillshare, documentaries, blogs, books, magazines, subscription-based magazines like The Economist or any other creative journal. That, and by definition, creativity is opposing norms. It's about thinking outside the box. So constantly observe, constantly on the lookout, scroll through Facebook, speak to friends. And once you've observed trends, once you've observed what people do on a daily basis or in their businesses, define it, place it in a box, and do the complete opposite. It's a strategy that I've always used, and I think we're doing pretty well with it nowadays. That is my 2 cents in creative energy and creative thinking.
Thanks. So thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Howard. And thank you, Peter, for joining us today during this session, this afternoon. Thank you, Toni, for the invite as well. Much appreciated. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, because I'm sure that we could go on with this discussion for a longer time as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You definitely had many more questions, which would have kept us going on for a marathon of conversations. Thank you so much, Audrey, for moderating, and our panelists for your insights. Those who are registered with us for the networking sessions, please hold on. Please stay with us online until I bid farewell to the people who are watching us on Facebook. As Rasmus had said earlier, you know, doing things virtually can also connect us with so many other people. In fact, we have double the people watching us on Facebook than the registered participants. But for the registered participants, we will very soon, shortly start our networking session. I'd like to wrap up the live stream we have with a reminder for the Creative Business Cup application. So just a reminder, the applications will be open until the 28th of April. You can find all this information on the Creative Business Cup Malta Facebook page, also on the Creative Business Cup and the CBNet. So you can also create your own profile on thisis.cbnet.com. And a reminder there, apply by the 28th of April. There will then be the shortlisting for the national finals on 14th, with the global finals in June. Remember, we're looking at innovative, creative startups across different sectors, from architecture, advertising, design, performing arts, video games, film, TV, visual arts, all the areas, and the culture and the creative industries. And if you have any difficulties, please do reach out. Once again, I'd like to thank the panelists and the participants, Malta Enterprise, especially Audrey and Francesca Farrugia for supporting us, ACM, Arts Council Malta, and PwC Malta, who will be supporting the Cup itself by providing the sectoral and also business advice to all finalists and also to the winner. Last but not least, I would like to thank Justin Formosa, who's an intern on this project, and also Annalisa Schembri, who's our virtual stage manager. So thank you all for following us live on Facebook. And from our end, we will now continue with our networking session. Thanks.